Well, I want to welcome everyone to this meeting of the Health and Government Operations and Health Facilities Subcommittee. We have 5 bills on our agenda, and we'll begin with House Bill 92. Tyler?
House Bill 92 is returning to subcommittee. The House Bill 92 as drafted would have put in a prohibition on using state funds to procure invasive and non-native plant species, with a set of potential waivers that a unit could apply for through BPW. There was an amendment introduced last time and is still up for consideration that restructures the bill substantially. So that's the first amendment in the PDF packet that was sent out at about 11 a.m. If the members want to look through that.
This is a sponsor's amendment.
Yes, it's from Delegate Ludke. It would only prohibit invasive species. There would be, and then only provide an exemption for research and educational purposes. There would be no waiver process allowed. BPW would not be part of the bill. And it's considered a compromise amendment, is my understanding.
Right. And it addresses several issues that were raised at the bill hearing.
Yes, it gives there was concern that there can be some uses for some non-native species of plants that aren't as harmful as invasive species, and then just concerns of slowing down projects unnecessarily. And so by limiting to just the preventing of invasive species, removes that concern for many of the stakeholders who had issues with it. Yep.
Is there just?
I think I saw Brad Fallon from Delegate Lucas.
Yes.
So if you have more questions on those details.
Is there discussion on this amendment?
I have a question.
Certainly. Delegate Kipke.
I mean, is there any use of invasive species currently? Maybe Delegate Ludke's person?
Yeah, none that I'm aware of, but yeah, if, Brad, would you be able to speak to that?
Has anybody checked that out? I mean, obviously invasive species are a scourge. Every time I see a plot of bamboo, it irritates me.
Yeah, thank you, Delegate. I think that's exactly what it is. Tyler, Delegate Lukey's actually in the waiting room. He's already here. He wanted to hop in and answer any questions about it.
Sure. If Saif, if you can get the delegate admitted so he can speak.
He's joining now.
Great.
Tyler, did you send that email out? I was looking for it.
Yeah, it would have been from my email to, I think I got all of your offices, and I tried to, if I had, other folks in your offices, emails at about 11 a.m., maybe like 11:01 even.
I found it.
Okay. And there's a reprint for this one, since it does, probably more than half the bill text gets changed.
Is the majority leader in the room?
I am. I'm happy to answer any questions from the subcommittee.
Leader, I just asked a question. I also mentioned I hate seeing patches of bamboo. You can add Phragmites, a whole other list of things that irritate me every time I see it. Most people, I don't think they realize how bad it is for our environment. But just curious though, is there any invasive species used by anybody for any weird purpose? Did you already check that out? I mean, I was thinking about, hills or, some areas where you need some something to keep the dirt from eroding or anything like that. Did you all already check that out?
It's a good question. The state maintained list of invasive species was established by the Department of Agriculture does not, to my knowledge, use any species which are used for some of these legitimate purposes. I think in discussing this bill over the last 8 months or so with a variety of state agencies, none of them raised objections on the invasive side. They did raise objections to the non-native side. And this amendment strikes the language about non-natives. We're kind of going back to the drawing board and trying to figure out how to fix that. But, almost to a person, particularly the agencies like the parks departments at the local level and DNR said, yeah, if we can limit invasives, that's fantastic.
Okay, thank you.
And is invasive defined, or is that a term of art?
So the state law currently leaves the definition of specific invasive species up to the Maryland Department of Agriculture, and they maintain a list which is updated through agency action on a regular basis with what those species are.
Delegate Chisholm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think just for a point of clarity, you would never use an invasive species plant unless it had a future benefit. But I looked up, I don't think there are any out there that we would use in the state of Maryland. I know in South Carolina, they use kudzu for what Delegate Kipke was talking about. But here, I don't think there are any examples, because I tried to find some, but I think that would be the only reason they ever used an invasive species here.
Yeah, the few the times I've seen invasive species that have been taxpayer funded plantings, it's generally just aesthetic. For example, the 29 Briggs Cheney Road reconstruction in Montgomery County a few years ago, they put in a bunch of Japanese barberry, which is highly invasive, and that's just aesthetic. There's no reason to have it there that is anything other than people think it's pretty.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Okay, any further discussion on the sponsor amendment? Hearing none, is there a motion on the amendment?
Move the amendment.
So moved. All in favor, aye. Any opposed? No. Delegate Hill, do you have an amendment?
Yes,
What bill are we on? Sorry, I was having trouble getting into the meeting.
House Bill 92.
Thank you.
Delegate Hill.
yes, I do. I think Tyler has the amendment. It was just to clarify that we're talking about outdoor plantings, and the bill sponsor is here. We've talked about it. He doesn't have a problem with the amendment. I believe the question Tyler raised and the sponsor also is it may not even be necessary if we're only talking about invasive species, but I just wanted to be sure that in use of indoor, government buildings where we do things primarily for the beauty, we're not trying to stop erosion or anything else, that the same prohibitions would not necessarily apply.
Sponsor.
So I would move the amendment for discussion.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the maker of the amendment and I discussed, I don't personally have any problem with it. I think the chances of, a planting in an atrium spreading is relatively limited.
Okay. Any further discussion on the amendment? Motion on the amendment? Motion is
Move the amendment.
favorable. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Is there a motion on the bill with
Move
the
the
two
bill.
amendments?
Move the bill as amended.
Second.
So moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Discussion, is it too late for discussion?
Not for you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Is this still going to the Board of Public Works?
No, they've been
No.
removed since there's no exemptions for invasive species, so they aren't involved anymore.
Okay, can you give me a quick synopsis of the amended bill again? I'm sorry, I was trying to get in, but was having.
Sure. And then if around 11 a.m. I sent out a packet with the amendment and a reprint, which might help also.
I
But
didn't see the reprint. Okay.
okay, so that removes any of the provisions for non-native species. It is now strictly a prohibition on invasive species. The only possible exemption is for use in research and education settings.
Did we ask the state highways if they use some of these for stormwater management or sediment control?
That came up, and it sounds like, including Delegate Chisholm's research, that there are no practical uses for these invasive species in Maryland.
Okay, and is there some way for them to appeal that if they have a use that in the future that they need to utilize that? What's the process for them to appeal?
In this bill, they wouldn't. They could go through, because the list is determined by the Department of Agriculture through their own policy setting. So if I guess they could go to the Department of Agriculture and get it removed as an invasive plant, if that would be appropriate. Otherwise, there would have to be changes to this law after it's enacted.
Okay, thank you.
On the bill as, thank you, Delegate. On the bill as amended, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Chair seeing none, the bill as amended is adopted unanimously. House Bill 190, Procurement Specialized Printing Services Contracts, Board of Public Works approval. Council,
House Bill 190 would define a term specialized printing services, and that would include printing for election ballot materials and for documents with personally identifiable information on it, PII, and then any procurement contracts for specialized printing services would have to be approved by the Board of Public Works. I do understand there's one amendment being offered by the subcommittee chair. But is there discussion? Did you want to go talk about the bill generally first, or do you want to go into that amendment?
well, since it's my amendment, this would impose the limit. This bill would only apply to contracts valued at least $100,000 under this amendment. Jared Demarinis supports this amendment from the State Board of Elections. I think that's the heart of what we're trying to do here, is those printings, and everybody is familiar with the issues that arose last fall. Delegate Kipke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just looking at the Department of General Services. They have, so first of all, I'm all on board with whatever we can do to make sure everything is as secure as possible. But they bring up some points, and I don't know if your amendment addresses it. They say it may negatively impact small business. I guess since you put in there the 100,000, that should address that, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
And then they talked about workload and all that.
This would decrease the workload for sure.
Okay. Because is it true that the bill was introduced with no dollar limit requirement or dollar requirement? Oh, okay.
Right. And it's now, as you know, 100,000 minimum.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate your questions. Motion on the amendment?
Move the amendment.
So moved. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So the 100,000, I'm looking, since Delegate Kipke was looking at the letter, they talked about many contracts being under 50,000. Your amendment takes care of that, which is within current agency and delegated authority, or under 200,000, which is within BPW's delegated authority. And so I just wanted your choice of 100,000 instead of 200,000 was to make sure that we can get, that we don't miss these kinds of contracts that would have affected our voting. Is that why you chose 100,000 instead of say 200,000?
I think the key was, for me at least, was for voting, yes, because of the issues that arose with that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Motion on the amendment?
Moved.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, aye. There are any opposed, no opposed. Motion on the bill is amended.
Move the bill.
Second.
Second, all those in favor of the bill as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Delegate Kipke, your hand is still up.
Yeah, I just want to confirm whether that's,
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
you're okay with the bill as amended.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, House Bill 301. Everybody's fan favorite, estates and trusts. For those of you who thought we no longer had that, we never took the class.
I think this is
Council.
within the realm of health and government, at least for now. So it's Estates and Trust Bill, Maryland Revised Uniform Anatomical Gift Act revisions, House Bill 301. The bill expands the scope for which anatomical gifts will be made from a person who's registered through the state. Current law, if you're registered to be an organ donor, it would just be for therapeutic or surgical use, or transplantation rather. And this bill would expand that to add other uses of anatomical gifts, including research and educational purposes. I do see, or at least I saw the sponsor, Delegate Shetty, was with us.
Okay, fine.
If there's any
Right.
questions for the sponsor, and a few other stakeholders are present as well, if anyone has questions on it.
And sponsor, you have an amendment? Do you wish to offer that amendment now and describe it for the committee?
Sure,
Delegate
I'd be
Shea.
happy. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So during last year's bill hearing that was held right before we adjourned early, the chair of the committee noted some concern with individuals who might have registered at the MVA believing that their organs would be donated to another individual.
Yeah, I am.
And so we drafted an
Hold
amendment
on.
that is included in your
Wait.
packet that that specifies that essentially those who have registered at the MVA are grandfathered in. So under the current structure, but going forward, it would be for all four purposes.
Would someone who registered by October 31st have the option of expanding? But they would have to do
I
something.
believe at any point, anybody has the option if they go on like the Donate Life website, but
Right, okay.
yeah, okay, I see heads nodding, so.
The proper heads.
And
Yes.
actually, I mean, it's interesting, doing the research for this bill has made me want to go on the website and do that too, because I think I had a misunderstanding about what registering at the MVA meant.
Okay. Delegate Kipke?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, I don't remember the bill hearing this year or last year, just because,
Okay.
I have 3 little kids and have horrible memory now. But why is this bill necessary? What problem does it solve?
So Maryland is one of the outlier jurisdictions that does not have the current allowance for organ donation that for those who have registered at the MVA to ensure that their organs, if they're not, say, suitable for transplantation to another individual, that they may be used for research or other types of issues. So I know we've got some experts here that can answer that more specifically if that needs more clarification.
So a Marylander who wanted their body to be used for research or education couldn't previously? Is that true?
Go ahead, please. Lisa, do you want to?
Hi, Lisa Spicknell with Donate Life Maryland. They absolutely can, but they would have to go to our website and make those changes. So currently, if they just register at the MVA, they're only registering just for those 2 options. They'd have to go in and make the changes. If we pass this bill and complete these changes, then from here forward, if that's what they want, then they would automatically be able to do that. But at any point in time, you can go to our website, you can designate exactly what you want your organs to be used for. So it's all able to be designated through our website after you've registered, or you can register at our website as well.
And this is actually a really big deal because in part because when an individual's organs do not meet the criteria for transplantation, which is pretty high, the organs, if not otherwise specified as being allowed to be used for something else, are discarded. And so right now, especially as we're like really emphasizing the need for the importance of science and research, having the ability to conduct research or utilize this here and aligning ourselves with, I think, every other state that allows for this makes sense.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Delegate Sliga and then Delegate Sample Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So somebody moves to Maryland, they go to the MVA after this bill comes into effect, they sign up to be an organ donor. Do they get a checkoff box that says, if you can't use my organs for human transplantation, you can use them for research, or is it just assumed?
It would be assumed. It would be included if this bill was passed.
Yeah, I think it should be a checkoff. I mean, you can donate my parents, I'm the executor of their will, and they've filled out all the proper forms for their body to be donated for research purposes. But my mother-in-law would never approve something like that. So I think you have to tell people that. That's a far different scenario to say, yes, if another human can use my organs, I'm happy to let that happen. than to say, I'd let medical students experiment on my organs. I think
Oh.
there needs to be some kind of information letting people determine they can check human transplantation, and then they can also check research, but I think it has to have a checkoff, some kind of consumer information where they understand what the choice is.
So this is a little separate. That would just be their organs if they have registered for this. You said your parents have allowed their bodies to be used. This would be completely separate from that. It wouldn't be their bodies, just the organs.
Right, but it's the same concept. Some people are fine with, the differentiation I was making between my
Right.
parents and my in-laws. My mother-in-law would not be okay with that. I think
Right.
there has to be some kind of consumer, information here, because there are two very different things. Donating your organs for another human is very different than donating your organs for scientific research. So I don't know if the, bill sponsor, Delegate Shetty, you would be open to an amendment to ensure that organ donors got to choose one or both of those options, but I would feel more comfortable with that.
If I may, I was going to raise a similar concern.
I'm certainly open to the idea and happy to discuss that with you all.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, Delegate Sample Hughes, and we'll get back to you. I just want to see if Delegate Sample Hughes is on the same issue.
Yes, actually, I am, Chairman. I really feel that we need to be very transparent when people do this. I think it's an honorable thing. I'm signed up myself, but I believe and I know I want to make sure I'm aware of what I'm doing if I'm signing up at the MVA, where my organs would go. So I think that we deserve to give that to Maryland citizens, a good, clear understanding. So I'm hoping that the bill sponsor would see the same concern that we are having right now.
Certainly. Thank you,
I think she
Delegate.
does. Could I ask our counsel, committee counsel, and I'm sorry, the witness who testified, Ms. Spicknell, if I'm saying that correctly,
You are?
if you could get together and work on an amendment?
We absolutely can, and that should be
Fine.
simple and easy to take care of.
Thank you. Thank you. Delegate Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would be a me too on an amendment like that. My daughter's in school and she's training with the physician's assistants, and they just did some work on someone who had donated their body. And she said she just didn't know that she asked me, do they know that this is what's being done with their body when they sign that card at the MVA? And I said, well, the organs, I think they do. I'm not sure about the body. So she also relayed to me she would never want to, her organs were okay, but her body to sign, she would never want to do that. So I think the amendment would be needed for transparency, and I'm a me too on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Pleasure.
Thank
Is it the will of the committee that we need to wait to see the amendment before we act on the bill? Delegate Sliga is nodding her head yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think, this is important. This is life choices for people, and,
Fine.
we have to treat the deceased people with the utmost respect. So I'm not saying you wouldn't, Delegate Shetty. I just think that, we should see that. Thank you.
We're fine. We will wait. We will
Mr.
have other
Chair?
meetings.
We're
This is
meeting
not our last
tomorrow.
meeting. Huh?
Yeah, we're having meetings tomorrow and voting.
Yeah.
Mr.
So-
Chair?
We will accommodate. This bill is not dead, if I may. Okay?
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Delegate Hill.
thank you. There is another amendment. Can we go ahead and with
I'm
that
sorry.
amendment? That we
Okay,
will,
what is it? Is that the sponsor's amendment or?
Yes, for the.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
The term being a grandfather clause. I apologize for not bringing it up sooner. It was at the hearing, so in my memory, it was already part of the bill. So I apologize if I misspoke at all.
Is that in the packet?
yes.
Yes, it is
Oh,
there.
okay,
And
that's
there's a
what
reprint
okay.
starting on page 7 of the packet, if you're working through. So that just adds the clarification that registered before October 31st, 2021, then your registration will not change. So for those who are registered to be an organ donor, like when they do it through the MVA, it would just be for therapeutic and transplantation. And then this change, whatever the change ends up being with possible amendments to be discussed, would go into effect for those who register or update after October 31st, 2021.
Fine.
That's the amendment that has been introduced.
Okay.
I'd like to
You
move that
on if the
amendment.
committee. Okay.
Amendment has been moved and seconded. Debate. All those in favor say aye. All those
Aye.
opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Okay, so sponsor amendment in our packets has been adopted. We will await further action until we have the amendment, the transparency amendment. Okay,
Thank you.
anything further on that bill? Fine, thank you. Thank you, Delegate.
Thank you.
House Bill 790, Procurement Office of Small Minority and Women Business Affairs, Small Business Reserve Program and Veteran-Owned Small Business Enterprise Program. Delegate Young, Delegate Pat Young. Council?
House Bill 790 would provide that the Small Business Reserve Program would include consideration for veteran-owned small businesses, and the Office of Small Minority Women-Owned Business Affairs would adopt certain regulations, including a percentage goal for state procurement contracts for veteran-owned small businesses. I'm not aware of any amendments. It doesn't look like the bill sponsor was able to join us.
Can you summarize the hearing, testimony at the hearing?
Doing my best to impartially, there's a lot of support from veterans groups and veteran small business owners. There were some questions from some delegates about how this might impact the current work that the small business or Small Minority Women Business Affairs Office is already working to promote those businesses that the state has identified as a priority for certain policies. And I'm not aware of what conversations took place between any of those members and the sponsor or other stakeholders.
Understood, appreciate that. This was the result of a work group, was it not?
Yes, there was a work group that took place over the interim. I understand Delegate Pat Young was part of it, and this was the basis of what they decided would be good policy from that work group.
And is there a Senate crossfile?
Yes, there's a Senate crossfile.
And you're now looking to see what the status of that is?
Trying to pull that up now.
Sure.
Senate Bill 598 from Senators Smith and Carozza has already crossed over to HGO with just a sponsor line change. They are doing those over there. So
We don't
the
want-
Senate
we don't want that
crossfile-
word to get out.
Senate. So the Senate crossfile is would be by
Substantively unamended,
yes,
correct?
Yeah, identical to this.
Is there a motion?
I see a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Delegate Hill.
Yes, just for clarification, I think the discussion that Tyler was referencing had to do with the question that I asked about if they're not specifying the bill that this is for disabled veterans. We're taking a huge group of folks, essentially making them equivalent to women and minorities who have been disenfranchised and having them compete. And I believe the response from Delegate Young is that he would expect that the department would figure out how to make that differentiation. In other words, if we're taking a whole bunch of people and putting them in, then what's the advantage to the other people or the correction for past disparities when we're now taking a large group of people who have a need to be given some preference, but it's a different reason. It's not because of past discrimination. But now they're put on the same field. And so, for instance, a middle-class white male veteran is now being given the same preferences as a, Latina, first, poor, whatever. That was the part of the discussion. Tyler, is that what you were referencing?
I think that again, yeah, there's questions of that nature from you, and I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, Delegate Charles had a question in a similar vein, and I don't know the extent of conversations. I received an email from Delegate Young saying that he was able to talk to Delegate Charles, but I don't know the details of that.
Is there a limit on the percentage of preferences or not?
Not in
For
the bill.
No, the bill would remove the current, so it's actually not a percentage preference right now. That's the statewide goal that would be removed. And then my understanding, part of the responsibility being added to the Governor's Office of Small Minority Women Business Affairs is that they would adopt a new statewide goal based on their considerations through regulation. And then if they would align, they would bring in preferences if they want for varying aspects of procurement that would involve veteran-owned small businesses.
And would that be subject to AELR review?
Yes, because it would be regulation, it would go through AELR.
I would like, Delegate Johnson has a question.
Thank you, Mr.
And
Chairman.
Delegate Zaligo.
You asked one part of my question. The other part was, do we know approximately how many businesses this would affect to know the scope of competition with the minority women-owned businesses?
I don't have that information, and I don't see that in the fiscal note. Yeah. Part of that will depend on the regulations that they end up adopting. So that'd be difficult to get a strong answer, but perhaps if we reach out to.
Yeah, I'll reach out to the sponsor. Thank you.
Yeah, they might through, I know the work group had a lot of stakeholders who might have that information readily on hand, or maybe it came up during their research.
All right, thank you.
I know.
Delegate Zaligo.
Thank you. Am I hearing, Delegate Hill, your concern that this group of folks might involve white men that are going to bring competition to the minority contracting status? Is that your concern?
I am concerned that groups that have, so let me just back up a second. So already there's a 1%. And my understanding of this bill is that it is directing that 1% be evaluated and another number be come up with. That's fine. I just want to make sure that we're doing due diligence. We know that that there are guardrails in place that this legislation does not take away, that essentially undoes any type of reparative or mitigation that we have set up for the disparities that have been institutionalized and perpetuated for so long. So yes, one example would be white men now, because they're veterans, being given the same preferential competitive advantage against non-veteran anybody else that we have decided is appropriate to give to women, is appropriate to give to ethnic and racial minority groups, right? And so we asked about, is this specific for disabled veterans? And it is not. So I just want to make sure that we're conscious of what we're doing here, because it's very, it's appropriate to be supportive of our veterans, and any program that supports them is great. But I just want to make sure that we're aware of what we're doing and that it's not causing unintended harm.
So I appreciate that. And so I'd just like to kind of bring into context here. Women are what, 51 or 52% of the total population. And African Americans, I think in Maryland, are about 32% of the population. I'm not sure what Hispanic is. I should know that, but I just looked up veterans and they're 7% of the population. So, it's a small percentage of the population. And I guess I'm speaking in favor of the bill because, and I'm not a veteran, but these are men and women that volunteered to serve our country and put their life on the line, should it be necessary. So many have lost their lives. Delegate Kipke's father-in-law was a prisoner of war in Vietnam in the Hanoi Hilton. So I think it's appropriate, and it is a very small, 7% is a very small percentage of the population. So I can't imagine it would have a large impact on those minority, business reserve program. I think veteran-owned small businesses, it's obviously a small business, which even narrows that veteran down. And certainly of the 7% that are veterans, I'd guess at least 3% are women. So, that they would be eligible under the women category. So I think it is a very small percentage, that we're talking about here. And I can't imagine it would have an impact on that program, much of an impact at all.
Vice Chair. The Vice Chair wish to speak?
Yes, thank you so much. I would like to know what the 2020 BSBE work group consisted of. Who was part of that work group? Did it have Blacks? Did it have other minorities? How many women as well? And also, I would like the Black Caucus Legislative Review Committee to review this bill. That would be just my request from it just makes sense.
I was already inclined to put a hold on this bill so that we could have a little more discussion among the affected parties and within the legislature. So we will hold this bill. Delegate Chisholm, do you have something to add?
Yeah, if you're going to do that and I guess to get to the Black Caucus, it would also be important to know how many veterans are actually minority veterans as well, because to say that all of our veterans are just white males is absolutely incorrect. I would venture to say that many of our veterans are minorities of the Black, brown community and women.
I agree.
So
And just for the record, that wasn't the statement, but thank you.
I apologize if I took you out of context, but my point is we have veterans of all different categories. So I think it's important to look at that as well. And I apologize to Delegate Hill if I took her out of context.
Okay, well, we will get back to that bill at a subsequent meeting. House Bill 920 opens Meeting Act definition, administrative function. Council.
House Bill 920 alters the definition of administrative function within the Open Meetings Act to exclude any personnel matter that affects one or more specific individuals. Therefore, such personnel matters would be removed from the administrative function exclusion of the Open Meetings Act. And I see the sponsor, Delegate Carr, is present. If you'd like to speak further or take questions on the bill.
Delegate Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there is an amendment on the bill that responds to the testimony from the Open Meetings Compliance Board. They testified in opposition to the bill. I think their point is that they think this is too hasty. If you make a change to the Open Meetings Act, it should be done more slowly, more carefully. So the amendment was intended to respond to that, to narrow the scope of the bill to employees that report directly to a public body. And that was shared with the Open Meetings Compliance Board. They still don't like the bill, even with the amendment. So I think the subcommittee has kind of a choice here. If you agree with me that this bill with the amendment is a good idea, it's not hasty, it's a wise way to address a longstanding issue in the Open Meetings Act that is featured in the Open Meetings Act manual, and that the Open Meetings Compliance Board, they are tasked with making recommendations to the General Assembly, and they've had a lot of years to fix this, and they haven't come up with any recommendations. So if you agree with me, you can pass the bill with the amendment. if you agree with the Open Meetings Compliance Board, that this is something that needs to be slowed down and taken more carefully. A different amendment that you might want to adopt is to turn the bill into a study and to task the Open Meetings Compliance Board with looking at this issue closely and just reporting back to us in November of 2021.
Delegate Chisholm, is your hand still raised on this bill or from before?
That was an accident. I'll take it down.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Delegate Saliga.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Delegate Carr, is your bill saying that personnel matters are now subject to open meetings and PIAs? And it could also include salary history or any personnel discipline, any of that is now going to be open to PIAs and open meetings acts?
No, no, what it's saying is, that gray area where, personnel actions fall into a gray area. They can either be handled in a closed meeting, because that's one of the legal ways you can close a meeting, and that's fine. You close a meeting, you have to go through certain steps where you have to say you're closing a meeting and why you're closing the meeting, but the meeting is still a closed meeting. It still happens in private. And a lot of public bodies follow that because that's the best practice. For some public bodies, they will handle personnel matters under the administrative function, which is not subject to the Open Meetings Act. So they don't have to tell you, when they met, whether they met, what they talked about. It just becomes completely dark and secretive. So with this bill and the amendment, they would embrace the best practices that a lot of public bodies follow, that the Open Meetings Act manual recommends that you follow, that when you take up these personnel matters, you do it in a closed meeting and you follow all the steps in the act to close a meeting.
But there would not be disclosure of any of that private information.
So no, nothing would be disclosed when you close a meeting for one of the 15 reasons that you can close a meeting. All you have to say is, you say we're closing the meeting. You have to cite which part of the statute. You're saying we're closing the meeting under the personnel exception, and you cite the statute number. You have to say, why it's in the public interest to close the meeting. And you have to say the topic, and the topic can be, to discuss the performance review of a specific employee. You don't have to say that person's name. You don't have to reveal the contents of that performance review. You just have to say, that you're meeting in closed session, and to give the public, enough reason sort of why, so that the public knows that it happened and why it happened. But the meeting itself is still completely closed, the employee's privacy is completely protected. That would not change, but we would bring all of the public bodies into the best practices. We're doing that under that part of the act of a legitimate closed meeting, and not of a something that's exempt from the act where you claim it's the administrative function, and then you don't have to. There's no paper trail or track record whatsoever of whether they ever met and why they ever met. It's very secretive under that administrative function, as the manual states several times.
Delegate Chisholm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was looking at some of the letters of testimony, and the State of Maryland Open Meetings Compliance Board, I don't know if your amendment addresses this or not, but they were saying underneath of personnel would also fall within administrative functions, which include job interviews, staff appointments, staff evaluation, performance evaluation, dismissals, would now be subject to all requirements by this in the act by this bill. Has that been addressed, or would somebody be able to ask for to see somebody's job interview, their performance, their evaluation? Would that be subjected in this bill now?
So I don't think that's addressed in the bill. I think those things are still matters that are legitimately kept away from the public eye. That doesn't change under this bill. The only thing that changes is, if a public body, let's say I'm a municipality and I have a, town manager that reports to me and I want to do that performance review, there would just be an announcement to say, we met on Monday at 5 p.m. and we reviewed the performance of the town manager. And, it would still be private. It would still not be subject to public disclosure, but the public would know, that it happened and when it happened, but not all the details, because those are all, legitimate things that should be shielded from the public.
My concern is when you're interviewing somebody, I don't know if you've ever had to hire somebody. When you hire somebody, you're looking at 30, 40, sometimes in the hundreds of different interviewees that would come in. And I wonder, is this
I think the way that the amendment addresses that is by limiting the bill to just people that report directly to the public body. So, if I'm a county commission or a county council, this doesn't concern, the hundreds or thousands of employees. It would only concern that very small number of employees that report, that are under the direct jurisdiction of that public body. And so I think that would really limit the number of times this would be invoked.
Okay. Thank you, Delegate. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further discussion? There is an amendment before us, sponsor amendment. Moved, and is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Any further discussion on that amendment? Motion on the amendment is for favorable. Is there a favorable motion?
Move.
Is there a favorable motion? Moved and seconded?
Second.
All those in favor of the motion of the amendment, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Is there a motion on the bill as amended?
So move.
Second.
All those in favor of the bill as amended, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Please raise your hand. Chisholm and Zaliga. Anyone else opposed? Excuse me, and Kipke.
I think we have to look at the opposition testimony on this bill. They're the experts on this, not us, so I'm going with them.
Understood. Okay, it's 3 opposed and the rest in favor. Do you have that down, council?
I do. Thank you.
Okay. You all have 16 minutes for lunch.
Wow.
30 is full committee, correct?